How's it going, everyone? I'm Josh from Elder Drunken Highlander, and this is our deck tech video for a deck that I am just hopping with excitement to share with you. It's totally rad! Absolutely riveting. Alright, I'll cool it. Anyways, this deck is called Tatsunari Toadstorm. It's a deck that leverages Tatsunari and his toads on cast abilities in order to create massive value for big storm turns that kill the table all in one go, as a storm deck does. Trust me, it's fun as frog. If you want to build your own version of this deck, or any janky deck really, come check out our Discord. We have a ton of people there all the time helping each other brew amazing decks, and sharing memes and also playing games on spell tables sometimes. If you want to support us directly, you can sign up for some rewards from our Patreon. Alrighty, time to jump right into the deck. That was another toad pun, guys. Tatsunari and Kaime. I have no clue how to pronounce this name. I'm sorry to all the toads. Tatsunari and his toad friend both have unique on-cast abilities. Tatsunari makes a toad, of course, and his toad, in turn, acts as an outlet for spam casting enchantments. Sweet! Now, I'm sure you're thinking that this deck storms off with the toad on the table in order to drain everybody out of their life, right? But you'd only be partially correct. Partially. What's actually happening is we're storming off using Tatsunari's ability in order to make a shitload of value off of a repeated toad token entering the battlefield every time we make an enchantment. How do we do this? It's simple. We sacrifice the toad. Bubble, toil, and trouble. Now there's a few ways we can do this. The simplest way is using combo classic Ashnod's Altar to sack the toad and continue to fuel our spells. The coolest way though is by using Blood Funnel. Blood Funnel reduces our next spell's cost by 2 mana, just sacrificing the toad when we cast it. And also it's an enchantment itself, which means we get a toad when we play our Blood Funnel. All you gotta do is cast an enchantment, trigger the Blood Funnel, sacrifice the toad, then Tatsunari triggers, and you get a toad. We get a discount every time Kaime croaks. But wait, there's more. We can also use Cryptolith Rite with a haste enabler, or just plain old Earthcraft, in order to tap our toad for mana before we sacrifice it to our altar and or funnel. This means that we are now producing or reducing at least 2 colorless and 1 colored mana every time we cast an enchantment. And given that we have a lot of things that draw us cards when we cast our enchantments, and the vast majority of our enchantments also draw us cards when they enter the battlefield, it means it would be pretty easy to go through our entire deck once we get one of these enablers and one of these mana generators on the battlefield. So it's really simple. It's an A plus B combo. It's Ashnod's Altar or Blood Funnel, and Earthcraft or Cryptolith Rite and a haste enabler. Honestly though, the kind of cool thing about this deck is that we're storming off with card quality that's very, very low. We're running stuff like Lithoform Blight, and it's actually kind of good in our deck because of Earthcraft. Combining these enchantments that can trip when they enter the battlefield and that fix our mana on basic lands, along with actual enchantress stuff like our Ogothian Enchantress or Setessan Champion, and we have a recipe to rifle through our whole deck until we find our win con of choice, which actually we have a few. The coolest method by far is Frogman himself and Destiny Spinner to make our spells uncounterable through Blood Funnel. Leaving Destiny Spinner out means our enchantments can't be countered, which means we can leave the toad on the battlefield and still reduce our cost by 2. This of course means we can drain people for 1 every time we cast an enchantment. We also have Grim Guardian and Tendrils of Agony as additional finishers. If you find that you look through your whole deck and still don't have enough damage to kill the table, you can also float some mana, cast Flood of Tears, put Tatsunari back into play, and then drop your hand all over again, burning out the table once more. Basically, once you start drawing 2 cards or more from an enchantment cast and begin to be able to look through your library, it's game over, it's GG. They can't do anything except remove your stuff. They can remove your stuff and then you're kind of screwed. But hey, sometimes when we finish things, we also just have a bunch of auras on Tatsunari, and he's a big fat commander damage beater, and we can sometimes kill a man. Oh, and don't worry about running out of cards. With abundance on the battlefield, it's impossible for us to draw out, since our draw trigger gets replaced. That means there's no way we can reach our untotally demise from this combo. So really that's it. The deck is surprisingly simple to pilot, almost like riding a toad, I imagine. Or maybe not. I'm pretty sure if toads were that big, they would just try to eat us. Notable inclusions! Erebos Black-Hearted. He's an enchantment that acts like removal, can be a sack outlet for our toad, and can draw us cards as we storm off, especially if we have some kind of life gain outlet on the battlefield, such as our Toad. Transmute Tutors. These guys can find our blood funnel fairly easily, and also are pretty useful on their own. Muddle is great protection for when someone tries to mess with our stuff, and Shred Memory can mess with graveyard strategies, which are really common, like second common only to landfall. Unbridled Growth, and all the other cards like it. These mana fixers are actually essential to our game plan. We can stick them on a basic and use it to tap for whatever color we need via Earthcraft. Combine these guys with enchantments that make extra mana like Utopia Sprawl, and we have quite the combo. Season of Growth and Elemental Bond. These guys get us value when the Toad comes to town, scrying and drawing cards. Season has the added bonus of drawing whenever we cast an aura for Tatsunari. Fallen Ideal and Greater Good. These are non-mana producing sack outlets for our Toady boy. The Ideal helps make Tatsu or another creature swing for lethal. Greater Good, on the other hand, adds an insane amount of card selection that makes it basically impossible not to storm off when it's on the battlefield. Honestly, the deck might not need Greater Good just because it's already insanely consistent, but I like it here. It feels spicy. Primo spice. Notable exclusions. These are cards that almost made the cut, but were ultimately overlooked. Consider them for your own version of the deck. Scourgemark and other draw auras. Surprisingly, there were more of these than I could fit in the deck. I'm not sure if focusing on utility auras versus power auras like Scourgemark is better. The utility auras offer more options outside the combo, but the power ones give us a really good backup plan in case we fizzle on a storm turn. I decided to go with the utility ones just because I've never really fizzled during gold fishing, and I don't anticipate a ton of interaction that like the protection suite that I'm running can't get to if I can, mulligan for something and hold it in hand. Toxic Deluge and other removal staples. In order to ensure that we had the correct number of auras, draw ETBs, I had to cut some staples. Staples are lame though, so whatever. Eutropia, twice favored, and other constellation effects. Most of these guys are just a little too cute to include in the deck. Maybe you can swap them in if you like some of their effects. The cool thing about Eutropia is if you combine it with Crystalline Crawler, you get another way to make mana every single turn by removing the counter she puts on Crystalline Crawler to get a mana of any color. It's like a build your own Earthcraft. It seemed a little bit too many hoops for this deck, which is, at first I was into it because I thought this deck would be super janky, but then when I built it, I was like, oh no, this is kind of good. So I ended up cutting it for more efficient options. Viscera Seer, Lampet of Death Vigil, and other sack outlets. Honestly, there were just too many options to include in the deck. Greater Good, like I touched upon earlier, is probably the worst sack outlet, so if you're going to switch something like one of these ones in, Greater Good is the one I'd swap out. Cloud Key and other cost reducers. Having Blood Funnel or Ashnod's Altar is already plenty. Most of our enchantments don't cost more than 3 mana anyway, so stacking cost reducers doesn't really benefit us that much. And stuff like Helm of Awakening just helps our opponents. So I'd rather focus on the Blood Funnel and the Ashnod's Altar that can combo with our Toad a little bit more and do other things similar to that. More so than I'd focus on something like Cloud Key or the Medallions that can reduce the cost of things in other ways. Words of Wind. Just to be clear, this card goes hella fucking infinite with our deck. I didn't include it because it just seemed too easy. Like, get it, play it, pop off by putting an enchantment back into your hand and recasting it, generating mana every time, and just going nuts, forcing your opponents to put all their permanents back in their hand and going, ha 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 ha, fuck you, I'm storming off and you don't even have access to any fucking mana or cards. Like, that seems really good, but almost too good and kind of egregious, and I like Manual Storm and not Infinite Storm, so out it goes. But like, if you want to actually take this deck and go hard as fuck with it, put that shit in there, because Words of Wind is hilarious and also kind of spicy. It's not a card that a lot of people know about, I feel. The other words cards are pretty cool too, like the Words of Wilding gives you another creature to sack, or just a bear to have, because bears are cool and fun to have on your team. And Words of Waste makes everyone discard, which is pretty griefy, and you can use it to kind of hate on the counterspell player. If you want to set up for a storm turn, you can play a couple auras and make everyone discard and then go off the next turn. It could work. So those are all considerations that you should be making for this deck, I feel. So this is firmly a high-powered deck, and it tries to win with its gimmick quickly and efficiently. We skip most of the fast mana that would really set this deck off because I didn't want this thing to be too strong, but don't let that fool you. This is a deck that can pub stomp if you aren't careful. Like with any Manual Storm deck, you should tell the table before you play it that you are playing Manual Storm. It's just polite. There's no need to ambush everybody with a 5-minute turn if they're going to be upset with you doing that your first time playing against them. This is more of a deck that I'd play against my friends than I would play against strangers at the card shop. And I definitely wouldn't play this against precons or other decks that are similarly matched to them. This may be janky, but it's highly optimized jank, and I feel like it would blow stuff like that out of the water if they didn't hold interaction for it. If you want to hold some interaction for us, we have a Twitter where we post largely shit posts and mediocre takes. We have an Instagram where we post pictures of altars that I make. We have a Twitch where we do various kinds of streams. And most importantly, we have a Discord where you can chat with us, build decks with our community, and just hang out and play some games. It's really awesome there. It's probably our main form of content at this point, and you should really check it out. I actually got this deck idea in the DMs with one of our patrons from our Discord, so shoutouts to Luke. You made this video, basically. Anyways, it's time to get this toad on the road. Stick around for after the end title card for outtakes, because God, I messed up a lot this video. Stay janky, my friends, and I'll see you next time. Ability in order to make a shitload of value off of a repeated toad token entering the battlefield every time you make an enchantment. How do we do this? It's simple. We sacrifice the toad. Bubble, bubble, toil, and trouble. Like, honestly, can you blame us? It's like a toad. We're a wizard. It's like, it's a trope, a stereotype. Am I stereotyping wizards?
No.
I don't know. Any wizards out there? Leave a comment. Do you feel stereotyped when I say that is sacrificing troads? I don't know. Any wizards out there? Leave a comment. Let me know if you feel stereotyped when I sacrifice the toads. Yeah, that's a terrible comment. Don't put that in the video, Josh. I mean, that's what you do when you cast magic, right? You sacrifice a toad.
Hey-ho.
It was in Macbeth or something.
I need healing.
The coolest way, though, is by using blood funnel, which is like a great device to sacrifice your toad in if you don't, which is like a great device to sacrifice your toad in when you really think about it. What am I doing with my hand here? Is this supposed to be a funnel of some sort? I really don't want to think about what happened if toads were that big. They're very hungry dudes. They eat a lot of things. They can jump very high, long tongues. They'd come for us. I don't know if would a gun work on like a toad that big? Like, probably not. Like a handgun wouldn't, right? Like, that's a horror movie. That's a Jimmy Neutron episode.